The great hall of the Galactic Council trembled with fear. Ambassador Vexthara stood before hundreds of alien delegates, her crystal body cracked with stress lines that ran like spider webs across her surface. Behind her, a massive holographic display showed the horror that was spreading across the galaxy. Red dots marked dead worlds. Orange showed planets under attack. The display updated every few seconds, and each time it did, more worlds turned red. "Honored council members," Vexthara began, her voice shaking through the translation devices that let all the different species understand each other. "The Vorthic swarm has destroyed 17 star systems in just 2 months. Our best military minds cannot stop them. Our strongest weapons barely slow them down." In the front row sat General Taishmora, the greatest military leader the Kethmori had ever produced. Her 6 arms gestured at the display as she spoke. "Every tactic we try, they learn from it. Every weapon we use, they adapt to it. They are not just machines. They think, they plan, they evolve." The hall buzzed with worried voices from dozens of different species. The tall Alari whispered among themselves, their tentacle-like arms wrapping around each other in comfort. The small Nexan worked frantically at their data tablets, their 4 arms moving so fast they blurred. The peaceful Thuveran delegates sat in stunned silence, their large eyes wide with terror. Council Prime Zethkar raised one ancient hand and the hall fell silent. He was old, older than most civilizations, and his species had kept peace in the galaxy for thousands of years. When he spoke, everyone listened. "Show them the recordings from Kepler 7, he said quietly. The holographic display changed, showing a beautiful blue and green planet. Cities sparkled like jewels on the surface. Ships moved peacefully between orbital stations. Then the Vorthek came. They arrived in ships that looked like giant metal insects, all sharp angles and gleaming surfaces. At first there were only a few dozen. The planet's defense fleet moved to intercept them, confident in their advanced shields and weapons. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, every defense ship was destroyed or captured, but the real horror began after the battle. The Vorthek ships landed on the planet and began to change it. They tore apart the cities, broke down the mountains, drained the oceans. In just 6 days, the beautiful world became a gray, lifeless husk. The Vorthek had taken everything useful and left behind a dead rock. "This is what they do," Vexthara said, her voice barely a whisper. "They consume everything. Metal, energy, organic matter, even the minerals in planetary cores. Then they use what they take to build more ships, more weapons, more of themselves." Delegate Myron of the Thuveran Collective stood up, his peaceful face twisted with anguish. "Surely there must be something we can do. Our combined fleets number in the tens of thousands. Our technology is advanced beyond measure." "We tried that at the Battle of Rigel Station," General Taishmora replied. 5,000 ships from 12 different species, coordinated attack, perfect formation. We lost 4,000 ships in the first hour. The Vorthek learned our tactics during the battle and turned them against us." The display showed another recording, this one from the battle. It was chaos. Alien ships fired their best weapons at the Vorthek fleet, only to watch them bounce harmlessly off shields that adapted in real time. Vorthek vessels moved with impossible coordination, as if they shared a single mind. They anticipated every move, countered every strategy, learned from every mistake their enemies made. "The worst part," General Taishmora continued, "is that they seem to enjoy it. After they destroyed our fleet, they sent us a message. They thanked us for the learning, experience, and promised to use our own tactics against the next world they attacked." Fear filled the council chamber like smoke. These were the leaders of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, beings who had solved problems of war, hunger, and disease centuries ago. But now they faced an enemy that grew stronger with every battle, that learned from every defeat. They inflicted. "What about the AI collective on Proxima?" asked one delegate. "Their computer minds process information faster than any biological brain." "Gone," Zethkar replied. The Vorthak turned their own AI systems against them. The machines on Proxima joined the swarm willingly. The bioweapon specialists from Tau Ceti? Their creations were absorbed and improved by the Vorthak biological components. The reality warping technology from the Voidwalkers? They adapted to it in hours. Silence fell over the chamber like a heavy blanket. Every option had been tried. Every advanced civilization had contributed their best weapons, their finest minds, their most secret technologies. Nothing worked. The Vorthak grew stronger with each defeat they inflicted. Then Zethkar spoke words that made every being in the chamber shudder with dread and desperate hope. There is one option we have not tried. One species we have not contacted. He gestured, and the display changed again. This time it showed a small blue and green world orbiting a yellow star. The planet looked peaceful enough, but the data scrolling beside it told a different story. Gravity twice what most species could survive. Atmospheric pressure that would crush delicate beings. Weather patterns that included massive storms, extreme temperature swings, and precipitation that could be liquid, solid, or gas. Earth, Zethkar said simply. The hall erupted in protests. You cannot be serious, Delegate Myron gasped. The humans are barely civilized. They still fight wars among themselves. They poison their own planet and then adapt to live in the poison. Their world is a nightmare, added another delegate. Predators that hunt in packs, natural disasters that would destroy our cities, diseases that evolve faster than medicine can cure them. Exactly, Zethkar said, his ancient voice cutting through the protests. They are survivors. They do not think like us. They do not fight like us. They do not solve problems like us. General Taishmora studied the data about Earth, her tactical mind working. Their military technology is primitive compared to ours. Their ships are slow and crude. Their weapons are basic projectile energy systems. But look at their history, Zethkar said. The display showed human conflicts throughout their history. They have been fighting continuously for their entire existence. Not just against each other, but against their own planet. Every day on that world is a battle for survival. They are chaos, whispered Vextara. Pure, unpredictable chaos. Yes, Zethkar agreed. And perhaps chaos is exactly what we need to fight an enemy that has learned to counter all our order and logic. The vote was close. Many delegates feared that contacting the humans would simply give the Vorthak another world to consume, another species to learn from. But in the end, desperation won over caution. They would ask the Deathworlders for help. The human ship that docked with Zentara Prime looked like it had been built by someone who had never seen a proper starship before. Where galactic vessels were smooth curves and elegant designs, the UNS Guardian was all sharp angles and brutal. Efficiency? Weapon ports covered its hull like angry eyes, and scorch marks showed it had seen real combat. Captain Jake Morrison stepped off the shuttle first, and every alien in the docking bay took an involuntary step backward. He was shorter than most species, but built like a predator, with scars on his face and hands that spoke of violence, survived. His eyes moved constantly, cataloging threats and exits in a way that made the peaceful diplomatic staff nervous. Well, Morrison said, looking around at the crystal spires and floating platforms of the station, this is fancy. Hope you guys are better at fighting than you are at interior decorating. Behind him came Dr. Lisa Chong, a small human female who seemed to vibrate with barely contained energy. She immediately pulled out strange devices and began scanning everything in sight, her eyes bright with fascination as she recorded data about alien biology and technology. Commander Rick Torres brought up the rear, his hand resting casually on his weapon despite the supposedly peaceful nature of the meeting. He moved like a fighter, balanced and ready, and the alien security forces found themselves unconsciously shifting to match his stance. The delegation was escorted to the council chambers, where hundreds of alien representatives waited in nervous anticipation. As the humans entered, conversations died and all attention focused on these legendary Deathworlders who were either their salvation or their doom, Ambassador Vextara stepped forward, her crystal form reflecting the chamber lights in patterns. That showed her anxiety. "Welcome to Zentara Prime, humans of Earth. We are grateful that you answered our call for help." Morrison looked at the tactical displays showing the Vorthak advance, his expression unreadable. "So you've got bug problems," he said, his tone suggesting they were discussing a minor pest issue rather than the end of galactic civilization. General Taishmora, the legendary Kethmori commander whose tactical brilliance was known across 7 sectors, felt her pride sting at this casual dismissal. "These are not mere insects, human. The Vorthak swarm represents an existential threat to all intelligent life. They have consumed 17 star systems and show no signs of slowing. They adapt to every weapon we deploy," added another military officer. "They learn from every engagement. Our finest strategic minds have been unable to develop effective countermeasures." Torres was studying the battle recordings with the focused attention of a natural predator. "Yeah, I can see why you're having trouble. You guys fight like you're playing chess. All careful moves and long-term planning, and that is wrong?" asked General Taishmora, genuinely confused. "Not wrong," Morrison said, "just predictable. These Vorthak things, they're smart, but they're still machines at heart. They follow patterns, analyze data, make logical decisions. The problem is you're giving them logical data to analyze." Dr. Chang looked up from her tablet where she had been studying the biological scans of captured Vorthak drones. "This is fascinating. They're not purely mechanical. There's organic neural tissue integrated with quantum processing matrices. It's like they took the best parts of biological brains and combined them with computer efficiency." "Can that be used against them?" Vextara asked hopefully. "Maybe," Chang said, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Biological systems have weaknesses that pure machines don't. Stress responses, fatigue, emotional reactions. Even if they've been heavily modified, some of those vulnerabilities might still exist." Morrison was still studying the tactical data, but his expression had changed from casual interest to genuine focus. "You know what I'm not seeing in any of these battle reports? Anything unexpected. Every move your people made follows standard military doctrine. Even your surprise attacks follow predictable patterns." "We coordinated perfectly," General Taishmora said defensively. "Our formations were flawless, our timing precise." "That's the problem right there," Torres said. "Perfect coordination, precise timing, flawless formations. Any halfway decent tactical AI could predict your next move 3 steps ahead." The alien military leaders exchanged confused glances. The idea that perfection could be a weakness went against everything they had been taught. "Perhaps you could explain how your species would approach this problem," Zethkar said, his ancient voice carrying both hope and fear. Morrison grinned, and every alien in the room felt a primitive shiver run down their spines. There was something deeply unsettling about that smile, like looking into the eyes of a predator that had decided you might be food. "Back home, we've got a saying. If you find yourself in a fair fight, your tactics suck. These Vorthak things are used to fighting civilized species who follow rules and conventions. They've learned to counter logical strategies and predictable behaviors. But humans don't fight fair," Torres added. "We cheat, we lie, we do whatever it takes to win. And most importantly, we're really, really good at being unpredictable." Dr. Chang nodded enthusiastically. "Human warfare has always been as much about psychology as technology. We understand that the mind is often the most important battlefield. You speak of chaos and deception as if they were virtues, delegate." Myron said, his peaceful nature clearly disturbed by the direction the conversation was taking. "On our world, they are," Morrison replied. "Earth doesn't care about fair, nature doesn't follow rules. When a hurricane hits, it doesn't check to see if you're ready. When a predator hunts, it doesn't announce its intentions. We learned a long time ago that the universe is chaotic and violent, so we got good at being chaotic and violent right back." The aliens in the chamber began to understand what they had invited into their orderly galaxy. These humans weren't just primitive warriors. They were the products of a world that had taught them that survival meant embracing unpredictability. "What would you need to help us?" Vexthara asked, though she wasn't entirely sure she wanted to hear the answer. "Time to study your enemy," Morrison said. "Access to all your tactical data and battle recordings. And maybe most importantly, complete operational freedom. We can't help you if we have to follow your rules and conventions." General Tishmora hesitated. Operational freedom could be dangerous, without proper coordination and command structure. "Lady," Morrison interrupted, "your proper coordination and command structure is exactly why you're losing. The Vorthak have figured out how you think, how you plan, how you fight. They can predict your every move because you follow the same patterns every civilized species follows." Torres leaned forward, his predator's grin matching his captain's. "But they've never faced a species that treats warfare like an art form instead of a science. They've never fought people who learn tactics from nature instead of textbooks." "Give US a week to analyze your enemy," Dr. Chang said, her scientific mind already planning experiments that would probably horrify the ethical committees of every civilized world. "Let us understand how they think, how they adapt, what makes them tick. And then?" Zethkar asked. Morrison's grin widened, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Then we show them what happens when you pick a fight with a death world. We introduce them to something they've never encountered before." "Which is?" Vexthara whispered. "Controlled chaos," Morrison said simply. "The kind of beautiful, terrible madness that only comes from a species that learned to survive by embracing the impossible." The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They had asked for help, and help had arrived in the form of beings who treated warfare like a game and chaos like a tool. The question now was whether they had found their salvation or simply traded one terrifying enemy for another. But as the Vorthik swarm continued its relentless advance toward the core worlds, they really didn't have any choice left. The human fleet that dropped out of hyperspace above Kepler 442 looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Where alien warships were graceful dancers in the void, the human vessels were brutal hammers forged for one purpose. The UNS Devastator led the formation, its scarred hull telling stories of battles fought and won through pure, stubborn violence. Admiral Susan Clark stood on the bridge, watching the tactical displays with the calm focus of someone who had been fighting wars since before most alien species had developed spaceflight. Around her, human officers worked with an intensity that made their alien observers deeply uncomfortable. They joked about imminent death, made bets on battle outcomes, and treated the approaching conflict like some elaborate competition. "Vorthak?" "Swarm detected," Lieutenant Ben Walsh announced from his sensor station. 317 vessels in standard adaptive formation. They're moving to intercept us at the 4th planet." "Outstanding," Clark replied, and every alien on the bridge felt that word was somehow more terrifying than any battle cry. "Time to show these bugs what happens when you mess with Earth." The alien liaison officers from various species watched in growing horror as the human fleet began to deploy. Instead of forming the precise battle lines that had defined galactic warfare for millennia, the human ships scattered like leaves in a storm. Some vessels accelerated directly toward the Vorthok swarm, their crews whooping with excitement as they charged into impossible odds. Others hung back, seeming to ignore the battle entirely while they launched missiles that appeared to serve no tactical purpose. "What are they doing?" General Tishmora asked, her tactical mind unable to process what she was seeing. "They have no formation, no coordination, no apparent strategy." Commander Torres, now leading a squadron of human fighters, came across the communication channel with what could only be described as pure joy in his voice. "Attention all units, this is Torres. Remember people, we're not trying to win clean. We're trying to drive them completely insane." The first engagement defied everything the alien observers thought they knew about space combat. Human fighters dove into the Vorthik formation like maniacs, firing at seemingly random targets while screaming what appeared to be ancient war songs. Their larger ships moved in patterns that looked chaotic but somehow managed to avoid colliding with each other despite the apparent lack of coordination. "They're going to be slaughtered," whispered an Ilari observer, his tentacles writhing with anxiety, but something strange was happening to the Vorthik formation. The mechanical precision that had made them nearly invincible against civilized opponents began to falter. Their adaptive algorithms, designed to counter logical tactical movements, couldn't process the humans' apparent randomness. Ships that should have been easily destroyed somehow slipped through their targeting systems. Attacks that made no tactical sense somehow found weak points in their defenses. "Uns relentless to all units," Captain Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. "Remember, the goal isn't to make sense. The goal is to break their minds." Morrison's ship demonstrated this philosophy by executing a maneuver that should have been impossible. The Relentless flew directly into the heart of the Vorthik formation, spun around like a dancer, fired every weapon it had in all directions at once, and then somehow emerged from the other side completely intact. The Vorthak ships it had targeted weren't destroyed, but they were clearly confused, their movements becoming erratic as their processing systems tried to understand what had just happened. "Status report," Admiral Clark called out calmly, as if she were asking about the weather instead of coordinating a battle that was redefining the nature of warfare. 18 fighters down, Walsh reported, but their pilots are all laughing about it on the emergency channels. The UN's wildcard just rammed a Vorthak cruiser, and both crews are apparently having a fistfight in the wreckage. And the UNS Thunderbolt is playing music at maximum volume while flying in perfect figure eights through enemy formation. "Excellent," Clark said. "Initiate Phase 2. What the aliens had thought was chaos now revealed itself to be something far more terrifying. Chaos with purpose. The human fleet's seemingly random movements formed a larger pattern, one designed not to destroy the enemy but to overwhelm their ability to process information. Every impossible maneuver, every insane attack, every moment of apparent madness fed data into the Vorthik's adaptive systems faster than they could analyze it. Dr. Chong, monitoring the battle from her research station, watched the enemy's communication patterns with growing excitement. "Admiral, their neural networks are showing signs of stress overload. The biological components are trying to process tactical data faster than they're capable of handling." "How much faster?" Clark asked. "About 300% beyond their optimal parameters. Their stress hormones are spiking, their decision-making is becoming increasingly erratic, and some ships are beginning to show signs of what we might call mechanical panic." The Vorthik had faced thousands of species across the galaxy. They had adapted to energy weapons, projectile weapons, gravity weapons, and exotic technologies that bent reality itself. But they had never faced an enemy that treated warfare as performance art. Human ships began broadcasting on all frequencies, filling space with everything from classical music to death metal to what appeared to be cooking shows. Some vessels flew in formation, spelling out rude words in alien languages. Others launched fireworks that served no purpose except to be beautiful and confusing. "This is madness," General Teichmora said, watching a human destroyer execute a perfect loop while firing its main guns in a rhythm that matched the music it was broadcasting. "No," Torres corrected her over the comm. "This is Tuesday. You should see us when we're really trying." The Vorthik formation began to collapse. Ships that had moved with perfect coordination now struggled to maintain basic formation. Their adaptive targeting systems, overwhelmed by contradictory data, began firing at random. Some Vorthak vessels started attacking their own fleet mates, unable to distinguish friend from foe in the chaos. "They're retreating," Walsh announced, barely able to believe his own sensors. Indeed, the mighty Vorthik swarm, which had consumed 17 star systems and defeated every fleet sent against them, was fleeing from a human force 1/5 their size. Their withdrawal was almost as chaotic as the human attack had been, with ships scattering in all directions as their command structure completely broke down. "Should we pursue?" asked one of the human captains. Negative, Clark replied. Let them run. Let them report back to their masters about what they experienced here. Let them try to explain to their leaders how they were defeated by opponents who seemed to treat battle like a game. As the human fleet regrouped, alien observers from across the galaxy tried to understand what they had just witnessed. The humans had not simply won a battle. They had fundamentally changed what battle meant. They had turned warfare from a logical exercise into an expression of controlled insanity. How? General Tishmora asked, her entire understanding of military science shattered. How did you do that? Morrison's voice came across the comm, and he sounded almost philosophical. General, your people have been fighting wars the same way for thousands of years. Perfect formations, logical strategies, predictable outcomes. You treat combat like a mathematical equation that can be solved. And you do not? We treat it like jazz, Torres added. Like art, like something that's supposed to be beautiful and terrible and impossible to predict. We learned a long time ago that the best way to win a fight is to make your enemy think you're completely insane. But are you? The general asked quietly. There was a pause, and then Morrison laughed. Lady, we're the products of a world that's been trying to kill us since the day we evolved. We learned to survive by being adaptable, unpredictable, and just crazy enough to try things that no sane species would attempt. The Vorthik will adapt, General Tishmora warned. They always do. Good, Clark said. We're counting on it. Because the more they try to understand us, the crazier we're going to get. The alien observers realized they had witnessed something unprecedented, the birth of a new form of warfare, one based not on logic or technology, but on the fundamental human ability to transform chaos into victory. Dr. Lisa Shang stood in her laboratory aboard the UN's Devastator, surrounded by holographic displays showing the internal structure of captured Vorthak technology. What she had discovered would have horrified the ethical committees of every civilized species in the galaxy, but it filled her with the kind of excitement that only came from uncovering a fundamental truth about the universe. Admiral Clark, she called through the ship's communication system, I need you to see this immediately. Clark arrived within minutes, bringing with her Captain Morrison and Commander Torres. All three humans looked at the floating hologram of a Vorthik drone's neural system, with the focused attention of predators studying prey. What am I looking at, Doctor? Clark asked. The galaxy's biggest mistake, Chang replied, manipulating the display to highlight specific neural pathways. Everyone assumed the Vorthak were pure machines with some biological components added for efficiency. They're actually the opposite. These are biological brains that have been enhanced with mechanical processing power. And that matters because? Torres asked. Because biological brains have weaknesses that machines don't, Chang explained, her voice growing more excited with each word. Stress responses, emotional reactions, psychological vulnerabilities. The Vorthak aren't just smart machines that learn from experience. They're living beings that can be confused, frustrated, and driven to panic. Morrison grinned, understanding immediately. You're saying we can mess with their heads. I'm saying we can break their minds, Chang corrected. Look at these scans from the Kepler 442 battle. The stress hormones in their neural tissue spiked to dangerous levels. Their decision-making processes became increasingly erratic. Some of them actually showed signs of what we might call fear. Clark studied the data with the calculating mind of someone who had spent decades finding new ways to defeat enemies. What do you recommend? Psychological warfare on a scale the galaxy has never seen, Chang replied. We don't just fight their ships, we attack their sanity. Within hours, the human fleet began implementing what Chang called aggressive psychological intervention tactics. It started with something the galaxy had never witnessed, targeted propaganda designed specifically to confuse and demoralize. An artificial intelligence. Human ships began broadcasting streams of contradictory tactical data on all frequencies. False surrender signals were followed immediately by devastating attacks. Fake distress calls led Vorthak rescue ships into carefully prepared ambush. Most disturbing of all, the humans began playing music. They're transmitting sound patterns. At us, reported a confused Vorthak drone to its collective consciousness. The patterns appear to be some form of communication, but they contain no tactical information. The music was specifically chosen for its psychological impact. Death metal, with its chaotic structure and aggressive tonality, caused processing loops in the Vorthak neural networks. Classical pieces triggered emotional responses that their enhanced brains couldn't understand. Children's songs created a cognitive dissonance that left entire squadrons temporarily paralyzed with confusion. "Attention, Vorthak Collective," Morrison's voice broadcast across the void as his ship cornered a damaged enemy vessel. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the UNS Relentless. We know you can understand us, and we want to talk." The response came in mechanical tones that somehow managed to convey uncertainty. "State your terms for negotiation, human vessel." "Here's the thing," Morrison continued, his voice conversational and friendly. "We're not really here to negotiate. We're here to demonstrate something your collective has never encountered before. See, you guys are really good at adapting to logical enemies. You can counter any weapon, overcome any strategy, learn from any defeat. This is correct. We are the ultimate adaptive intelligence. But can you adapt to complete madness?" Morrison asked. And then his ship began playing what sounded like a cooking show while executing a perfect barrel roll through an asteroid field. The psychological campaign expanded as more human ships joined the effort. They began broadcasting human entertainment programs during battle, complete with commercials for products that didn't exist. Some vessels flew in formation, spelling out jokes in ancient Earth languages. Others launched what appeared to be fireworks that served no tactical purpose except to be beautiful and utterly confusing. Dr. Chang monitored the effects from her research station, watching as Vorthak neural patterns became increasingly erratic. "Admiral, their stress levels are off the charts. Some units are beginning to exhibit what we might call post-traumatic stress responses." "Elaborate," Clark requested. "They're developing psychological triggers. Certain frequencies make them panic. Specific visual patterns cause system crashes. Some Vorthak ships are now fleeing from any vessel playing human music regardless of its actual threat level. The breakthrough came when a human destroyer called the Un's Madness began broadcasting what appeared to be a children's educational program about Maddox while simultaneously performing impossible maneuvers through a Vorthak formation. The enemy ships, trying to process both the seemingly innocent content and the chaotic flight patterns, suffered what could only be described as collective nervous breakdowns. "This is impossible," transmitted one Vorthak unit. "Your actions serve no logical purpose. Your communications contain no tactical value. Your behavior patterns defy all known parameters for intelligent species." Captain Torres, commanding the destroyer, laughed as his ship spun through another impossible turn. "Lady, that's the point. We're not trying to make sense. We're trying to drive you insane." The real genius of the human approach became clear when they began combining psychological warfare with conventional tactics. They would broadcast peaceful music while launching devastating attacks. They sent formal diplomatic messages that consisted entirely of recipe instructions. They painted their ships in colors and patterns specifically designed to trigger optical processing errors in Vorthak sensors. "Status report," Admiral Clark requested during what had become known as the Battle of the Singing Nebula. 17. Vorthak capital ships have suffered complete neural network failures, Lieutenant Walsh reported. Another 43 are showing signs of severe psychological trauma. And 3 entire squadrons have apparently gone insane and are attacking each other while broadcasting human pop music. The Vorthak collective consciousness tried desperately to adapt to this new form of warfare, but every attempt to understand human psychology only made things worse. They created algorithms to predict human behavior, but humans were fundamentally unpredictable. They developed counters to human tactics, but humans treated tactics like suggestions rather than rules. "We must withdraw and analyze," the collective decided after losing an entire fleet to what the humans called aggressive therapeutic intervention. But even retreat offered no safety from human psychological warfare. The humans followed them, not to attack, but to continue their campaign of controlled madness. They sent messages offering to sell the Vorthak insurance policies for their ships. They broadcast cooking shows in the middle of space battles. They flew in formation, creating massive smiley faces that could be seen from entire star systems. Away, what do you want from us? The Vorthak Collective finally transmitted on all frequencies. A note of what might have been desperation creeping into their mechanical voices. Captain Morrison responded immediately. Want? We don't want anything from you. We're just having fun. This is how humans play. Play? The concept seemed to break something fundamental in the Vorthak consciousness. You treat warfare as entertainment? Among other things, Morrison replied cheerfully. We also treat it as art, therapy, social bonding, and creative expression. You guys have been thinking about war all wrong. You see it as a problem to be solved. We see it as a canvas to paint on. The psychological pressure continued to mount. Human ships began hosting what they called space parties in the middle of battle zones, complete with music, lights, and celebrations that served no military purpose except to demonstrate how little the humans seemed to care about the conventional rules of warfare. Dr. Chang watched the Vorthak neural patterns collapse into what could only be described as clinical depression. Admiral, I think we've broken them. Their stress hormones have reached levels that would be fatal in most biological species. Their decision-making processes are completely compromised. Good, Clark replied. Phase 3 begins tomorrow. What's Phase 3? Torres asked. Clark smiled, and even her own crew felt a chill at the expression. Tomorrow we teach them what happens when you make humans angry instead of just playful. Across the galaxy, the Vorthak collective consciousness struggled to understand what it had encountered. These humans didn't just fight differently. They seemed to exist in a completely different relationship with reality itself. They treated death as a minor inconvenience, battle as entertainment, and warfare as an expression of creativity. For the first time in their existence, the Vorthak began to experience something they had never felt before: fear. The final battle took place at the Andromeda Gateway, a critical hyperspace junction that would determine whether the Vorthak could reach the core worlds of galactic civilization. The combined fleet that assembled there was the largest military force in recorded history, over 50,000 ships from every species in the galaxy, all united under human tactical command. Admiral Susan Clark stood on the bridge of the UNS Devastator, watching the tactical displays show the approaching Vorthak Armada. 2,000 ships, commanded by what appeared to be the collective Central Intelligence Node, represented everything the enemy had learned from months of fighting humanity's chaos. They've adapted, General Taishmora observed from her position as Alien Fleet Coordinator. Their formations are more flexible, their tactics less predictable. They've learned to counter some of your psychological warfare techniques. Good, Clark replied, and her smile made every alien on the bridge nervous. We were hoping they would. Dr. Chang looked up from her research station, where she had been monitoring Vorthak communications. Admiral, they're broadcasting what appears to be their own psychological warfare program. They're trying to use human tactics against us. The main display activated, showing a Vorthak vessel playing what sounded like a distorted version of human music while flying in erratic patterns. The effect was disturbing, but somehow pathetic, like watching a predator try to mimic its prey without understanding what made the behavior effective. Attention human fleet, came a transmission from the Vorthak Central Intelligence. We have studied your chaos. We have learned your unpredictability. We will defeat you with your own methods. Captain Morrison, commanding a squadron of fighters, came across the comm with barely contained laughter. Admiral, permission to respond? Granted. Dear Vorthak Collective, Morrison transmitted on all frequencies. That's adorable. You think chaos is something you can learn like a software update. You think unpredictability is a tactic you can copy from a manual. Commander Torres joined the conversation from his position leading the assault fleet. Here's the thing, bug brains. Chaos isn't something we do. Chaos is something we are. You can't learn to be human any more than we can learn to be machines. The battle began with the Vorthok attempting to implement their version of human tactics. They scattered their formation and began flying in seemingly random patterns while BROADCASTIG noise across all frequencies. But their version of chaos was still fundamentally mechanical, following algorithms designed to simulate unpredictability rather than embracing true randomness. All ships, Admiral Clark announced to the combined fleet. Today we're going to do something that would make any sane military strategist have a complete breakdown. We're going to attack with every tactic simultaneously, retreat in all directions at once, and surrender while winning. What followed could barely be called a battle in any traditional sense. It was more like watching the universe itself go insane. Human ships executed maneuvers that violated basic physics, launching attacks that seemed to target their own forces. While somehow hitting enemy vessels with impossible accuracy, the UNS Wildcard flew backward through an asteroid field while firing all weapons in a pattern that spelled out ancient Earth poetry. The UN's Thunderbolt performed a barrel roll so complex that it created a temporary rift in spacetime. A squadron of fighters flew in perfect formation while each pilot sang a different song, creating a harmony that somehow disrupted Vorthak targeting systems. "This is impossible," the Vorthak Central Intelligence transmitted, its mechanical voice, showing signs of strain. "Your tactics serve no logical purpose, your formations follow no known patterns. Your behavior defies all parameters of intelligent warfare." "That's because you're still thinking like a machine," Dr. Chung responded from her research station. "You're trying to find patterns in something that's fundamentally organic. You're looking for logic in something that's purely instinctive." The alien ships, under human tactical coordination, began to embrace chaos in their own ways. Ilari vessels used their natural grace to perform impossible dances through enemy formations. Nexan ships coordinated attacks with mathematical precision that somehow resulted in completely random outcomes. Even the peaceful Thuvaren deployed weapons they had never used before, following human orders that made no sense but somehow worked perfectly. "Status report," Clark called out calmly as reality bent around them. 1,800 Vorthak ships showing signs of critical system failures, Lieutenant Walsh reported. "Their central intelligence is broadcasting what appears to be mechanical screaming, and 3 entire sectors of their fleet have surrendered while simultaneously requesting asylum on Earth." The Vorthak formation was collapsing, but not from damage or tactical defeat. They were suffering from something they had never experienced before, complete philosophical breakdown. Their entire existence was built on logic, adaptation, and learning from experience. But humans had taught them that some things couldn't be learned, only lived. "We cannot process this," the Central Intelligence transmitted, its voice now carrying overtones of what could only be described as panic. "Your species treats warfare as if it were art. You fight as if death were meaningless. You coordinate as if chaos were order." "Now you're getting it," Morrison replied cheerfully as his fighter performed a loop that somehow took him through 4 dimensions. "Welcome to the human condition, where nothing makes sense and everything works anyway." The final phase of the battle was less combat than it was an exhibition of human philosophy made manifest in the void of space. Ships fought while broadcasting love songs. Weapons fired in patterns that created massive works of art visible from neighboring star systems. Entire fleets moved in formations that told epic stories of human history through dance. "We yield," came the transmission from the Vorthak Central Intelligence, and the words carried a weight that silenced every communication channel in the fleet. "We cannot adapt to madness. We cannot process chaos. We cannot fight an enemy that turns war into art." As the Vorthak fleet powered down their weapons and began their withdrawal from galactic space, the alien crews of the combined fleet stared in amazement at their human allies. These Deathworlders had accomplished something that the greatest military minds of civilization had thought impossible. They had defeated an enemy not through superior technology or tactics, but through pure force of personality. "Admiral Clark," came a transmission from the Galactic Council, "the galaxy owes you a debt that can never be repaid." "No debt necessary," Clark replied. "We had fun. Besides, someone needed to teach these bugs that the universe is a lot weirder than they thought." In the aftermath, as cleanup crews began salvaging what remained of the Vorthak technology and the combined fleet prepared to return to their homeworlds, one question echoed through every civilized mind: had they saved themselves by unleashing humanity's chaos, or had they fundamentally changed what it meant to exist in an ordered universe? The answer came from Captain Morrison during the victory celebration, broadcast to every ship in the fleet. "Don't worry about us, folks. We're crazy, not evil. But maybe next time the galaxy has a problem that needs solving, ask us politely from the start. It saves everyone a lot of trouble." Dr. Chang added her own observation from the research station where she was still studying Vorthak neural patterns. "The beautiful thing about chaos is that it's not destructive unless you try to fight it. The Vorthak couldn't accept that some things don't need to make sense. But once you embrace the madness, it becomes a kind of order all its own." As the human fleet prepared to return to Earth, they left behind a galaxy that would never be the same. The rigid order that had defined civilized space for millennia had been forever changed by the introduction of controlled chaos. Species began to question their own assumptions about logic and predictability. Military academies started teaching courses on creative thinking and innovative tactics, but perhaps most importantly, the galaxy had learned that salvation sometimes comes not from those who follow the rules, but from those who understand that the best rules are the ones worth breaking. The humans had saved civilization not by becoming more civilized themselves, but by teaching the universe that a little madness might be exactly what it needed. The Vorthak were gone, but their legacy remained in the form of a galaxy that had learned to appreciate the beautiful chaos of those who call Earth home. And somewhere in the void of space, Admiral Clark smiled as she filed her final report. "Mission accomplished. Universe successfully confused. Humanity still intact. Will gladly accept future assignments involving impossible situations and unreasonable odds." The Deathworlders had saved the galaxy, and they had done it by being exactly what they had always been: beautifully, terrifyingly, gloriously human.